I'm sorry to say we've come to that time again. Time to say good night.
Most people assume Paul McCartney lived a perfect life after the Beatles ended. He didn't. In Lagos, men with knives stole his demo tapes in the middle of the night. In Tokyo, he was arrested and locked in a cell as prisoner 22. His marriage to Heather Mills became one of the most bitter divorces in British history. And through it all, he carried a quiet grief that began when he was just 14, after losing his mother. Now in his 80s, Paul once admitted in a quiet moment that he understands why life eventually has to end. It wasn't something people expected to hear from him. But maybe it makes sense when you look at everything he's been through. Because behind the music, the fame, and the image, there were stories just as complicated, and sometimes even darker, playing out in the same era. When Alice Lawn stepped onto the Lawrence Welk show in 1955, something shifted instantly. The show already had an audience, but Alice brought a new kind of energy. She had charm, confidence, and a voice that made people stop what they were doing. Soon, she became known as the Champagne Lady. Week after week, families watched her perform beside Lawrence Welk's orchestra, elegant, polished, and seemingly perfect. But that kind of popularity came with a hidden problem. The more viewers loved Alice, the more she became the reason people tuned in. And for a man like Welk, who built his world on control, that wasn't easy to accept. The tension stayed quiet until one small moment turned it into a scandal. In 1959, Alice appeared in a dress slightly shorter than usual. During a dance with a child guest, her knee became visible. It was harmless. Barely noticeable. But Welk's reaction was anything but. He fired her. And the explanation made it worse. He claimed her appearance didn't fit the family-friendly image of the show, saying, "Cheesecake doesn't belong here." Even in the 1950s, people found it ridiculous. The backlash was immediate. Thousands of letters poured in. Fans accused Welk of hypocrisy and cruelty. The man who presented himself as the guardian of values suddenly looked like someone hiding behind them. Because the truth wasn't really about a dress. It was about control and money. After 4 successful years, Alice had asked for a raise. It was reasonable. But Welk refused. To him, it wasn't just business, it was a challenge to his authority. So he reframed the situation. Publicly, it became about morality. Privately, it was about power. And for a while, it worked. But not for long. The public didn't let it go. Fans complained to ABC. Sponsors were contacted. The pressure built. Eventually, Welk realized he had misjudged the situation and reportedly asked Alice to return. She refused. That decision changed everything. She walked away from the spotlight that made her famous, choosing dignity over exposure. She built a quieter career, performing in Texas and Las Vegas, far from the national stage. Years later, her story became more than just television gossip. It became a symbol of how early television treated women who became too visible, too successful, or too independent. In 1981, Alice Lawn passed away from a rare autoimmune disease. But the story never really faded. Because it wasn't just about a knee. It was about pride, power, and the cost of standing your ground. That need for control wasn't limited to one performer. Behind the cheerful image of Lawrence Welk was a perfectionist who demanded discipline. There were strict rules about behavior, appearance, timing, and even personality. No one was supposed to outshine the system he built. And that system would soon collide with something much darker. In 1955, the Lennon sisters, Diane, Peggy, Kathy, and Janet, joined the show. America fell in love with them almost instantly. They represented everything audiences wanted: innocence, harmony, and family. But fame can attract the wrong kind of attention. A man named Chet Young became obsessed. He convinced himself he was spiritually married to Peggy Lennon. What started as delusion turned into something far more dangerous. He wrote letters, even contacted President Lyndon B. Johnson asking for permission to marry her. When reality didn't match his fantasy, his obsession turned toward someone he saw as an obstacle: their father, William Lennon. On August 12, 1969, that obsession turned deadly. Young approached William in a golf course parking lot and shot him at point-blank range. He died instantly. Later, police found disturbing evidence: an image of William with a drawn gun pointed at his head, labeled High Noon. This wasn't impulsive. It was planned. The tragedy shattered the family. 2 months later, Young took his own life. But the damage was already done. The Lennon sisters continued performing. The smiles stayed. The music stayed. But behind it all was grief that never left. It became one of the darkest stories tied to an era that seemed so wholesome on the surface. Another quiet struggle unfolded in the same world, this time involving race. In 1964, Arthur Duncan joined the show, becoming the first black regular performer on a national TV variety program. It should have been groundbreaking. But the show never acknowledged it. No announcements. No recognition. Just silence. Years earlier, Duncan had appeared on a show hosted by Betty White. When backlash came from the segregated South, she refused to remove him. Her response was simple: he stays. The show was soon cancelled. That moment revealed something harsh about television at the time: principles often lost to profit. So when Duncan joined Welk's show, he entered a space that offered stability but not full recognition. For nearly 20 years, he performed flawlessly. Quietly. Consistently. He didn't protest. He didn't fight publicly. He endured. And that, in itself, became a statement. By 1971, even Welk himself faced rejection. ABC cancelled his show not because it was failing, but because they believed the audience was too old. Welk didn't accept it. He built his own system. Through syndication, he distributed his show across more than 200 stations. It worked. In many cases, it outperformed network programs. What looked like the end became a comeback. While networks chased youth, Welk chased loyalty, and he won. Behind the scenes, he was also building wealth. While performers earned modest salaries, Welk created a business empire worth millions through music rights, real estate, and investments. From a dirt-floor childhood in North Dakota to a multi-million-dollar empire, his journey was extraordinary. But it wasn't simple. Because behind the smiles, there was always control. And while all of this was unfolding, Paul McCartney was writing his own complicated story. In 1973, he took his band Wings to Lagos, Nigeria, to record Band on the Run. Before they even arrived, members quit over money disputes. Only Paul, Linda McCartney, and Denny Laine remained. The environment was intense. The studio, owned by Ginger Baker, was hot and uncomfortable. Then came the robbery. Paul and Linda were attacked. Their demo tapes, early versions of the album, were stolen. Days later, Paul collapsed, struggling to breathe. For a moment, Linda thought he had died. And yet, they kept going. The chaos shaped the music. The album became a success, a comeback forged through pressure. In 1976, Wings soared again. Their U.S. tour was massive, sold-out shows, millions earned, and crowds that proved Paul still had it. But in 1980, everything fell apart again. In Japan, he was arrested for carrying cannabis. The tour ended instantly. He spent 10 days in jail. It wasn't just embarrassing, it marked the beginning of the end for Wings. Then came a different kind of loss. Back in 1969, Paul and John Lennon lost control of their music catalog when their partner sold his shares without warning. It created tension between them. A silent fracture that never fully healed. In 1995, life changed again. Linda was diagnosed with breast cancer. Paul stepped away from everything. He stayed by her side, day and night. When she died in 1998, it broke him. He said he cried for a year. And it brought back an older pain, the loss of his mother, who died from the same illness when he was just a boy. Some grief never really leaves. He tried to start again. In 2002, he married Heather Mills. But the relationship fell apart, ending in a bitter, public divorce. Still, one thing remained constant. Even now, in his 80s, Paul performs for hours without stopping. It's not just performance, it's persistence. A refusal to fade. In 2023, he used technology to bring back John Lennon's voice for what became the final Beatles song, Now and Then. It felt like closure. Looking back, his life isn't a perfect story. It's a human one. Full of success, loss, mistakes, and resilience. And maybe that's why it still resonates. Because behind every polished image, whether it's a television host, a rising star, or a global icon, there's always something more. Something complicated. Something real. If you want more untold moments, hidden truths, and the reality behind fame, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Prestige Buzz, turn on the bell notification, and never miss what's really happening behind the spotlight.